The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Eric Coleman with IIST and I will be the moderator for today's webinar, an overview of testing a data warehouse by Wayne Yaddo. We're excited to be able to join us today and set aside an hour to attend this webinar. This webinar is one of a series of free webinars to introduce the topics as well as the presenters of the upcoming PSQT conference in San Diego, California, August 14th through the 19th at the Sheraton San Diego Hotel and Marina. PSQT is the only conference that focuses on the practical best practices in every aspect of software quality assurance and testing. The ongoing theme of the conference, Practical, Proven, Feasible, keeps the focus on what works. To learn more about this exciting conference, visit psqtconference.com. You may submit your questions at any time by using the question box in your GoToWebinar window. Today's presenter will answer as many questions within the time allowed at the end of today's session, but will also be taking questions throughout the presentation as well. This webinar will be recorded and will be made available for viewing within 48 hours at psqtconference.com. At the end of today's webinar, you will be asked to complete a short survey. At IIST, we strive to provide the highest quality educational resources for the public and would appreciate it if you could take a few minutes to complete this short survey. I will now turn the webinar over to today's presenter, Wayne Yaddo. Wayne?
Hello everyone. I'm pleased that so many of you are participating in today's webinar. I'm a 9-year veteran of data warehouse testing, and I'm eager to pass along some of what I've learned over those many years. Just a little bit about my background. I worked at IBM for many years as a operating system developer and tester. For the past 15 years, I've worked in New York City as a data warehouse, primarily as a data warehouse consultant, testing consultant, that is. For the past 3 years, I've been writing data warehouse quality assurance articles for Better Software, Professional Tester, Tea Time for Testers, and a few others. I've also developed presentations of the kind that you'll see today for SQE STAR and STP testing conferences. So if any unanswered questions or comments remain after this presentation, please feel free to send them to my email address, which is on the screen, or to wyaddo@gmail.com. That's wyaddo@gmail.com. I'll be happy to respond. Just a quick clarification on questions during the presentation. You can key them into the GoToWebinar screen. However, it's only during the last 10 minutes or so that I'll be taking a look at those questions and responding to as many as possible. I want to suggest that you note that many of the data warehouse QA principles and methods presented here can be used for data integration and data migration projects as well, in addition to data warehousing projects. The best practices and the test methodologies presented here have been compiled based on knowledge gained from practical experiences while testing data warehouses and BI applications at many organizations over 9 years. I look forward to sharing with you what I've learned and practiced over this time. Data warehouses are becoming increasingly large, increasingly complex, and important to the business, to the various businesses and organizations that implement them. They are becoming increasingly large and complex because they are drawing more data from a greater number of more diverse sources across the enterprises to create much larger and richer assemblages of information. And they're becoming increasingly important to the business because they are being leveraged by a wider range of users to support larger numbers of decisions that impact the bottom line. Without effective data quality management measures in place to support their data warehouses, organizations will remain highly vulnerable to operational, financial, and perhaps regulatory risks. Organizations today may have conventional tools in place for validating certain types of data, once, for example, names and addresses. But anyway, once they are in the data warehouse, but they often lack the controls necessary for preventing bad data from getting there in the first place or properly validating financial and other data. Test planning for a data warehouse and BI project should be designed to overcome the most significant challenges faced by data warehouse testers. So the agenda for today's 1-hour session is to discuss the challenges of data warehouse testing. That's quite important to understand before interviewing testers and getting the planning underway and developing ETL test scenarios. Understand the broad spectrum of challenges that are facing a data warehouse testing team. I recently saw a list of challenges from a white paper written at a university in Europe where they listed 36 major challenges that should be addressed while testing a data warehouse. Today you'll see 6 or 8 of what I consider to be the most important. Next we'll talk about the tester skills that are necessary for data warehouse testing. Talk about how to plan, at least at a very high level. We'll discuss some of the ETL, the extract, transform, and load test scenarios that should be considered. We'll discuss as well some of the test tools, and unfortunately there aren't large numbers of test tools available today, but we'll talk about the few that I have discovered, and perhaps some of you folks know even more. And lastly, some best practices that I have found throughout the last several years. We'll take a look at just a couple of definitions before getting into the discussion of data warehouse testing. A data warehouse is a database used for reporting and data analysis. It's a central repository for data which is created by integrating data from one or more disparate sources, often over a long period of time. Now, we were probably both reading that at the same time, but this sort of gets us on the same page. 2 keys here to testing are that the data comes from disparate sources. On my last project, the numbers of sources was more than 60 sources, and those included relational databases, text files, and other kinds of source data to be loaded into the data warehouse. And when we talk about a long period of time, data warehouses contain data sometimes for many, many years. Just as an aside, on one project we tried to load data from 9 years back. Some of that data existed, some of it did not, and we finally had to resort to the last 3 years. So it's sometimes not easy to bring together all the data that may be required. ETL is a term that you'll hear often, and I'm quite sure that most of you listening today are familiar with this term, but I'll take just a moment to get everybody again on the same page. Extracting represents extracting required data from all the sources. Transforming data, which is done often during ETL processes in loading the data warehouse. Doing something to the sources in staging. Cleaning and conforming to the business rules, and aggregating data and summarizing and creating defaults for some fields, and doing lookups for other source fields so that the source fields will be actually different in the data warehouse. And the L in ETL represents loading, aggregating the data, loading it into the final set of data warehouse tables. All of this is easy to say, but there's a great deal of testing involved in doing all of this. If you do a Google search on data warehouse books using the image feature of Google, you'll get a result something like this. There are many, many books on the subject of data warehousing, And I think it's very important for testers and the QA team to have a good knowledge of data warehousing in general and of the particular data warehouse that they are testing. My favorite book is this one, the Data Warehouse Life Cycle Toolkit. At least that was a fine book to get started with. It's now in its second edition and probably its last edition, written by Ralph Kimball and Margie Ross. It covers data warehousing from gathering requirements to designing the warehouse, developing the code for the ETLs, through testing and deployment. It's quite a good book. As an aside, the Kimball Group will disband at the end of this year. They call it retirement. So we'll see no more of the fine books that they have produced. Another book that is valuable for testers is Practical SQL Queries. There are few skills more important to a data warehouse tester than understanding the query language and being able to issue a wide variety of SQL queries. Now, when I'm showing books here, however, as you probably know, there are many other sources of information about data warehousing and SQL queries and the SQL language. And I would urge that you, if you're looking to learn SQL, that perhaps you go to the web. You'll find some online courses that are just terrific. If you're looking for some examples, send me an email and I'll send you some sample sites where you can learn how to learn the SQL language in order to develop queries for the data warehouse. Another book is Testing the Data Warehouse, written by Doug Vucevic and myself 2 or 3 years ago. It's due for a second edition. I can't guarantee when that'll come out, but we'll be doing that. 2 more books. I came upon these only 2 or 3 years ago, and I wish I'd had them, both of them, 9 years ago. I'm going to tell you a little bit about them. The first one, called Impossible Data Warehouse Situations, written by Sid Edelman with contributions by others. This book takes a unique look at the problems faced by data warehouse professionals. The author and contributors have gathered over 90 situations that they've been asked about in their seminars and presentations, and they've faced in their own work. They're all real situations, and the topics covered include staffing, budgeting, security, vendors, architecture, and data quality. Each of the impossible situations in the book have 1 or more solutions contributed by the expert panel. And if you don't have the book or can't get it somehow, I do have a PowerPoint presentation on this book, which is really very valuable in itself. It's quite an extensive PowerPoint presentation. The second book, called Data Warehouse Project Management, the average data warehouse takes years to build in many cases and costs millions of dollars. And yet many data warehouse project managers are thrown into their project management position without a clear idea of their roles, authority, or even objectives for a data warehousing project. So it's little wonder that 85% of all data warehouse projects fall short of their objectives, or late being delivered, and may cost more than they were budgeted for. So both of these books I urge you to read, even as perhaps if you're members of a QA team. Much of what you learn in these books can be passed along to others on a project to attain better quality. And now we get into talking about data warehouse quality issues and planning and staffing and things of that kind. These are just a few of the quality issues that the test team is going to encounter when testing the data warehouse. First, they'll find data errors in the data models and the mapping documents. And that's kind of frustrating because it's from these two documents that test plans and test scenarios are built. But you're going to find errors there, and you'll have to write defects accordingly. You'll find that there are quality issues with the target, with the data warehouse DIM and fact tables. They've all had to be created from scratch and loaded. You're going to need to write test cases and do a lot of test execution to rid yourself of the problems in those tables. You'll find too that there are quality issues with extracting data from their various sources, transforming and cleaning the data, loading the data in the data warehouse in MARTS, and this one right here sometimes is often overlooked. The data warehouse is often loaded with external and third-party data, and that data may not fit with your organization standard and so forth. I've been on several projects where we identified external data that was necessary to be loaded into the data warehouse, and since it had been perhaps available for the public for years and of course updated often, but we found that the specs for that data and the data itself in just too many cases did not match. And we've also found that external and third-party data providers sometimes change data without notifying the recipients. So it's really important to keep up with any changes that that those third parties are making to their data, and they can be this can be a very troublesome area. There are two document types that are important for data warehouse test planning and test execution as well. One type of document are the data models, which organize data elements and standardize how those elements relate to one another. It's quite likely that this chart you see on the screen represents tables and the relationships of those tables, primary keys, foreign keys, where the same data is found in other tables, etc. So data warehouse models are crucial to the success of your data warehouse. If they're incorrect or non-existent, your warehouse effort will likely lose credibility. All product leaders should take the necessary time to develop and maintain the data warehouse data models. It's important to note that only a few very experienced data warehouse modelers should build that model. But it may be one of the most important skills on your data warehouse team. The data architecture and model is the blueprint of any data warehouse, and understanding it helps everyone grasp the bigger picture. The model helps stakeholders, ETL designers, programmers, and the QA team to understand the key relationships between the major and critical data sources. So I stress the importance of getting the data model right and keeping it right throughout the entire project. Another document that is very important and used continually by testers are the source to target mapping documents. A mapping document, source to target, is used as a first step for a wide variety of data integration tasks, including data transformation, data mediation between data source and destination. So the backbone of a successful BI solution is an accurate and well-defined source to target mapping document of each source and each target table. Source to target mappings help designers, developers, and testers understand where each data source is and how it's transitioned to its final displayed form. They should identify the original source column names for each source table and file, any filtering conditions, transformations used in the ETL process, the destination columns in the warehouse and or the data mart. Helps you derive a testing strategy focused more on customized elements of the solution. And just a quick look at this sample source to target mapping document. In the red, we have a source table along with all the columns in that table and the data types of that table. In the brown colored font here, we have the target table of the relatively large amount of information that is important for the data warehouse tester. I am hearing some noise on the line right now.
Yes, Wayne, we're getting a lot of feedback. There we go. Now it's better. Wayne, can you hear me?
Okay, good.
Yep, that we're good.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Now you notice that from source to target, sometimes the column names and the data types change. In the case of this second field in the course source table, its name is changed when in the target table, and its size is changed. And here in the expression field, these are transformations that will take place when the academic specialization field is loaded from source to the target. In fact, you can see that its length is being increased, and there are some transformations that will be done. Again, the data model and the source to target mapping are key tools used by the QA team and others as well. Data warehouse testers, what do they need to know? And of course, everything here is in a nutshell today. I've tried to boil down what we can do here in an hour in a presentation that describes an overview of data warehouse test planning and test execution. Well, first, the data warehouse tester needs to know the data extract process, the data staging task, ETL design and construction, source and target schemas, variety of sources that are used, how the data warehouse is updated, and profiling methods for source to target. For example, in the data staging task, the tester will need to come to learn how duplicates are removed, how data is cleansed, how defaults are added for various fields. In the ETL design and construction, the logic used in each ETL so that he or she can do some meaningful troubleshooting. Source and target schemas, how to read them and who is responsible for them and how to write defects against them. And when we talk about who is responsible for them, the data warehouse tester will often be communicating with those who are responsible for these very key documents. When we talk about the variety of data sources that a data warehouse tester needs to know, he has to understand how to deal with relational database data, XML data, text data, Excel data, and how to use tools to access and analyze each one of these. How the data warehouse is updated through incremental loads and change data capture. And certainly one of the primary skills and knowledge that is needed by testers and members of the other members of the test team are profiling methods for source and target data. Now I'm going to do something for just one moment here and I'll come right back. Okay. Here is a common type of chart that is created to represent a data warehouse for a particular project. On the left side here under the cursor, we typically have operational systems that are providing source data to this new data warehouse from marketing, in this case sales, ERP, etc., and from external data being loaded into a staging area. where the data may be cleansed and some data transformed and so forth before being moved into the actual data warehouse. And some data warehouses are created in such a way that data marts are generated from the data warehouse itself. A data mart is a subset of the data warehouse, which is usually oriented to a specific business line or a specific team. Data marts are small slices of data from the data warehouse to meet the needs of various end users. Now this chart shows ETLs in several locations here between the loading of source to staging, and between staging to the data warehouse, and ETLs again to the data marts if those data marts are in fact a part of your data warehouse. Each ETL represented here on this larger chart represents not only an opportunity for testing, but a necessity for testing, because every time there's movement from one layer to another, we're usually talking about different technologies, changes to the data, dropping of data, removing duplicates, and so forth. Testing is required at all of these junctures. Some challenges for a data warehouse QA team. And some of these are from my experiences, most are actually, but I think most data warehouse testing teams will encounter these kinds of challenges. For example, the source data to populate the data is dirty, not in compliance with the requirements or with expectations. In some cases, the ETL development to unit testing is inconsistent and perhaps inadequate before turning the testing over to the QA team. I have found in my last 2 or 3 projects that tools offered by Informatica, in particular, data quality tools are helping the ETL development team do a better job at the unit testing before the QA team takes over. Another challenge, ETLs developed without the aid of ETL tools such as DataStage and Informatica and SSIS. And in cases like this, the ETLs are developed probably using stored procedures. In the case of Microsoft SQL Server, that would be the T-SQL language, of Oracle, PL SQL. And it's my experience that ETLs that are developed through stored procedures are problematic. They don't have the advantage of these really advanced tools such as these right here. But even on projects where these tools are used, these ETL tools, there are quite a number of stored procedures that are often used to move the data from one location to another, and it's quite a challenge to test under those circumstances. But there are methods and processes that we get into in the more extensive training and tutorials that we have that describe how best to deal with stored procedures. Another challenge for the QA team, data losses can occur during ETL. That's a pretty general statement, but it's one of the biggest issues that and the source of many of the defects that the testers will be writing. One more chart on challenges for the QA team. Inadequate ETL design documents are often an issue. And there we go. Data models and source-to-target mappings and the ETL design and logic documents and even the requirements documents may be substandard and requiring the testers and the test planners to do a lot of digging to get answers, to learn what really needs to be tested. The source-to-target data model and mappings In many cases, I shouldn't say many, I've seen many cases, but it's probably not that prevalent, but are not reviewed or approved by project stakeholders, not consistently maintained throughout the development life cycle. That is the biggest problem I've seen with the data models and the mappings, not consistently maintained throughout the development life cycle. Results in defects, invalid defects being written, and many other problems as well. Another challenge is that source tables fail to meet data mapping specs. The mapping documents may be out of date or substandard. That sort of is similar to the 2 bullet points ahead before this. Source data profiling not completed early in the project. And this, in fact, I've seen many cases where the source data, the input to the data warehouse, has not been profiled at all. And we'll talk just a little bit later about what profiling is, but in the bottom line, it's a method for gaining a good understanding of the source data, every table, every file, every text file, and every field in them before they are loaded into the data warehouse. So these are just a few of the challenges. Now let's talk about some of the tester skills. Most of the projects I've been on, when a data warehouse when they begin developing one and staffing up for it, they try to find testers within their own organization who can participate in the testing of the data warehouse. But quite often, unless the testers, existing testers on a team, have prior experience or already have gained these skills, a new data warehouse may be looking outside the organization for the kinds of skills. For example, looking for people who have a firm knowledge of data warehousing and database concepts. And it's really firm. It doesn't mean a practical working knowledge, but a firm academic knowledge of data warehousing and database concepts. And another tester skill, probably among the most important, is advanced expertise with SQL queries. And stored procedures, the ability to at least, if not write stored procedures, and I doubt that testers will be often asked to do that, but they do need to, often need to review stored procedures to understand the logic and much more about what is really going on in the ETL stored procedures. And advanced expertise with database and SQL editors. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as to what these are and what they can do for you. But in general, these SQL editors are tools that are used to generate and execute SQL queries. Advanced expertise. Expert data profiling, methods and tools. I have often found this to be a missing skill, even among data warehouse or database testers who have been on the job for a while. There are many books on the subject. Well, at least I know of at least 4, and there are ways to learn all about data profiling. It's just an especially important skill to have as a tester. We can talk more about that at another time, and we do in the extended class. And skills with MS Excel. Well, I've never met a data warehouse or a database tester who didn't have a pretty good knowledge of Excel and how to use it to test test data, source and target data. Now, it's not the complete tool by any means, and in fact, MS Access is another tool that goes well beyond what MS Excel can do. Anybody who knows MS Access is really going to probably do, and that is the ability to create and execute queries with MS Access is going to be a real asset to the testing team. Just 3 more skills, that there are many more, but an understanding of data models, data mapping, design and ETL coding, ETL design and ETL coding, an important skill. Expertise with multiple database systems. in almost every environment where I've worked as a data warehouse tester. They had Oracle, SQL Server, DB2, and other database systems, and it was important to be able for testers to be able to access and access the data on those systems and understand exactly how to do that. Obviously, there are similarities between what a tester needs to know for each of these database systems, but the differences are pretty substantial as well. And another tester skill is the ability to troubleshoot the ETL tool and stored procedure sessions and workflows. In other words, it's quite important to when apparent defects are spotted, to do some troubleshooting, to do some analysis of the ETL tool and how it perhaps created the defect, or the stored procedures, how they created the defect, so that an adequate defect description can be provided to whomever is going to solve the problem. Now here's a sample ad for an ETL test lead, and this came to my desk just a week or two ago from New York, from one of my favorite staffing firms down there. I won't be joining this team for a number of reasons, but they are looking for an ETL test lead. And the requirements are really quite stringent. I haven't changed a word of their job description, although I have removed a few of the job description items that are generic in nature, like ability to communicate well and things of that kind. So they're looking for 4 years experience in testing data warehouses, strong knowledge in various processes, ETL and BI processes, strong in SQL queries for both, not both, for Oracle, SQL Server, and DB2. Now the differences in SQL are not really significant between these database systems, but there are some important differences. Strong in validation for Informatica and DataStage and SSIS, all in one client has a need for an understanding of a tester within understanding in these three for these three database systems. Quite interesting. And I would say part of the answer to that may be that this ETL lead will be supporting more than one data warehouse testing project, my guess. Exposure to end-to-end data validation, not just portions of ETL data validation, but the entire end-to-end spectrum. And they're looking for somebody who is strong in BI report validation, so not only data validation, but report validation. Here's a key for this client: work with SMEs, or subject matter experts, the ability to work with them to resolve gaps in questions and requirements. The ability to assist developers to recreate test failures, leading to problem resolution to requirements. Exposure to DB tools, database tools such as Toad, PL SQL Developer, SSMS. And by the way, Toad, I don't very often tout one product versus another, but Toad is really the best of, in my opinion, of the database management tools. Nice to have exposure to automating data warehouse testing. I think what this says in a few words is that there are very few opportunities in data warehouse testing for automating, and they probably recognize that, and if they can find somebody with some exposure to doing it, then fine, they'd like that. A primary tester skill is SQL. Testers will need to do all of what you see here. Join data table from multiple sources, queries, run queries that filter to narrow data results, run aggregating queries to mimic what is going on within an ETL. the ability to format the results of their SQL queries. And testers will need SQL knowledge to convert data types, in particular dates and times, which there are many, many formats for dates and times, and there are more than a few opportunities to do that for a data warehouse tester to do this, because dates and times often differ a great deal from source to target or from varying sources. A primary tester skill is data profiling, and I'm trying to put on just one slide here of what data profiling is all about, and it's pretty hard to do. But data profiling, in my experience, is something that should be done against both source and target, or target being the data warehouse data. Call it a column or an attribute or a field. Identifying the frequency distribution of values within each field, the number of records in various tables. Profiling involves identifying nulls and not null fields and whether in fact they meet requirements. Various data types can be identified through data profiling. Do they meet specifications? Column lengths, do they meet specifications? And et cetera, et cetera. Again, several books on the subject. The more a tester can learn about data profiling, the more valuable he or she will be. Planning the strategy for data warehouse testing. Carefully analyze requirements, all requirements documents. And this is typically what I have done when I join a data warehouse team, is request all of this kind of information and analyze it very carefully over the first days and perhaps a couple of weeks on the project to really understand what the project is all about. So in the case of data models, all the data models for both source and target, which will need to be tested. Now those may be hard to get, especially the data models. But if no data model is available, the tester needs to be able to use SQL editors to gain a better understanding of the model for either source or target data. Carefully analyze the target mappings, the stored procedures, design and logic documents, and whatever may need to be done to deploy to QA various databases. Sometimes the testers do that, and in other projects, others will be conducting the deployment task. However, testing will need to be done against the deployment of the data to the various environments. And lastly, carefully analyze the necessity for various QA tools that will be needed for the particular project under test. I have a very large variety of data warehouse strategy documents. Some are 10 pages in length, and some are up to 100 for very large projects. Planning for the QA strategy, setting the objectives. The data warehouse tables again, the objective for testing the data warehouse tables, do they adhere to the data models and the data mappings? For data completeness in all data warehouse tables, and that affirms that all source data that should be loaded was loaded, no dropped tables, no dropped fields, or data within fields. So planning as a test objective for data completeness. Data transformations. The testing for data transformations is one of the most important jobs of a data warehouse tester. There are very few data warehouses that are built where the data is loaded from source to target without changes being made to the data. So a key objective here is, since most of the important data that is loaded will be transformed in one way or another. Another objective is to determine and to assure the data quality is existing throughout all tables through profiling. No truncation of data, no nulls where there shouldn't be any, no duplicate data where there shouldn't be duplicates. Performance and scalability, ensuring that the performance of loading is within boundaries set in the requirements and that the target tables can be scaled to meet future requirements. On one major banking project on which I was a member, we waited till the last 6 or 8 weeks to begin performance and scalability testing, and this is on a project that was over a year long, and that was a major mistake to delay the performance and scalability because we discovered major problems that required bringing in consultants to bring performance up to speed so that the production date could be met, or at least closely met. Another testing objective, integration testing. I think I mentioned that just a little bit earlier. All source tables accessed and available and loaded. User acceptance testing. Quite often the test team doesn't have too much involvement there other than supporting user acceptance testing, but I've again been on projects where the business team, which would be assigned the user acceptance tests, didn't know as much as they needed to in order to create test scenarios and test cases to be run during UAT. And so in cases like that, the test team was very helpful in bringing the UAT testers on board. Well, more on planning for QA strategy, because planning is really just so important to the success of any test endeavor. And so regression testing. Regression tests will be carefully prepared and run and automated to the extent possible. No regression. We're looking for no regression after reloads and data that should read data fixes. Column data ranges per table, min-max values are meeting expectations. And I'm going to skip the rest of this in the interest of time. We're closing in on an hour, and there are some other slides that I want to share with you before our time is up here. Data quality tools and techniques for the QA team. My experience, the SQL editors are a very important tool, and testers who know these tools, whether it be Toad or SSMS, anyone who has a strong experience and knowledge of the SQL editors that will be used on the project will be a very valuable person. As the testers will conduct data profiling, null field analysis, data type analysis, and etc. Throughout the entire project using SQL editors. They'll use MS Excel for a variety of reasons. Profiling can be done with MS Excel. Data value sampling, a lot of sampling, and data type analysis. And of course, MS Access, a very underused tool in my opinion, but I do have documentation as to how to use MS Access to its best on a data warehousing project. Some of the test automation tools that are available, now there are more than what I'm showing here. I have actually no experience with any one of these. The Informatica tool here called named DVO is said to be quite good. However, it works only in the Informatica environment. RTTS in New York City provides a tool called Query Surge. There's a lot of information about this tool available. I think it's primarily useful for regression testing and also for environments where the source to target is pretty much unchanged from loading from source into target. Could be wrong on that, so it is a tool well worth looking into. One of the primary reasons I have little experience with these three tools is because most projects that I've worked on over the past many years, they're unwilling to invest in what is often a pretty substantial cost for tools of this kind. I'm going to skip over this one. It's an important topic, but once you begin talking about data warehouse tools and automation, let's say for automation, it's quite a lengthy topic. But here are some of the common objectives that one looks for in automating data warehouse testing. I'll say that most job descriptions that I see for data warehouse testers, they are looking for those who can automate at least some portions of the testing, and quite often the automated tools that are often employed are homegrown and to meet the needs of a particular project. Just a couple of charts on best practices, and these are the last of, we have only this chart and I believe one more. And this is something I encourage: participating in design reviews. The ETL team should, I believe, participate, and I do mean participate by talking and by providing feedback during ETL requirements and design reviews. Another best practice: to gain in-depth knowledge of each ETL, the order of execution, restraints, and transformation. It's an absolute necessity in most cases to gain an in-depth knowledge in whatever you're testing that involves the ETL logic. Participate in ETL unit test case reviews. That's often not possible because there are not, in many cases, unit test case reviews. I have found it very valuable to get to know your developers and to sit down with them and to learn how they are testing, what they are testing, and it'll help fill gaps in their testing when we design our own QA test cases to be run after unit testing is complete. And after ETLs are run, use checklists for QA assessments of dropped records and session failures. I will only add here that checklists are just extremely important throughout the entire process of data warehouse testing, and I have large numbers of checklists that can be used in a variety of situations. I'm going to pass that last slide on best practices, again in the interest of time. I'll just add that data warehouse applications require not just good testing skills, but also active participation in requirement understanding and design reviews and design understanding. In addition to that, an in-depth knowledge of data warehouse concepts and technology is a must, and for the test team. And often this has to be done on your own time. So I'm available now for any questions and comments. You can see we're down at the bottom of this chart where you can contact me if you'd like. Now at the moment I don't see any questions. Eric, do you see any that have been created?
Yes, well, we do have a couple of questions, if you can't see them. One person is asking, what does BI stand for, or BL?
Oh, okay, that's good, and I really should have. BI is business intelligence, and business intelligence goes almost hand in hand with data warehousing, because it's business intelligence applications that often use data warehouses to provide analytics in quite a variety of ways, but BI is business, represents business intelligence. And did you have another one, Eric?
Yes, can you not see them? You cannot see them?
No, unfortunately not. I don't know why.
Okay. One person did ask, they were just saying I'd be interested in the documentation for using MS Access for DQL.
Okay, and so let that person know that if they send me an email, I'll compile that information and send it right out to them.
Perfect. Perfect. Do you have, just while we're seeing if there's any other questions that attendees might have, do you have any typical questions that you get for this presentation, Wayne?
Yeah, I'm going to name 3 here. One is entry and exit criteria to formal data warehouse testing. People often wonder what should the test team state as in terms of entry criteria, and that is the acceptance of data to be tested, not just thrown over the wall to be tested, and they also wonder and would like to know more about exit criteria. What does it mean to exit tests, the formal process. And just 2 other topics that they often ask questions about is how to estimate the ETL resources, time and skills. I have material on that, and they also ask how to automate ETL testing. That's a subject that I don't have a lot of information about. The projects that I've worked on are primarily manual testing and early testing within the data warehouse project. I have found that automation is probably most useful toward the end of the data warehouse project, during system testing and production readiness testing, and even those automated tools are very helpful during after deployment to production. So if anyone would like to know, the one that I think I can address most easily right now is the entry and exit criteria for formal data warehouse testing. Let me see if I can find that. Wow. No. Here we go. Now, here are just some ideas on probably a couple of slides here for entry and exit criteria. Number 1, the ETL unit tests are complete, and they include the database load verification into into development. We often are not, as a QA team, informed when unit testing is complete, and we want to know that the testers have signed off on the testing that on the unit testing that they had employed. ETL code, database issues, change requests, and open defects from development have all been documented. Okay, so all of the issues, all of the change requests, and all of the defects that are in effect in a new build, that they have been documented and available for QA. And here, data track release notes have been delivered. So for the data drivers that are being provided to the QA team, release notes that describe open defects, change requests that are still open, things of that kind. And also, we want to assure that no critical database or ETL issues are open, and for all open defects, severe and otherwise, we want to know what they are and a description of them. I think we have another sheet here, another slide with QA entry criteria. The QA has access to the test and dev environment for a minimum of a week before QA starts. Now that might be kind of unusual in that the QA team, in order to prepare for a driver that's going to be delivered, it's very valuable to have access to that same environment as it exists in test or in the dev environment for a week or so that we can become familiar with it before beginning our data testing. And an approved data model and mapping documents that they're available at least a week before, so the QA can update and further finish the test cases. And that the ETL and database QA test cases are complete. In other words, an entry criteria, we'll want to make sure that that we are ready on the QA team to begin the tests. And there are more, so we could go on and on here, and even the exit criteria. So those are some of the questions that I'm often asked. Automation, estimation, and by the way, I have a very, I believe, very interesting and useful process for estimating ETL resources and time. So if you're to attend one of the later sessions that we have, you'll learn quite a bit about that. Any more questions come up, Eric?
No, Wayne, that is all we have to today. I'd like to remind everyone that this is just a sample of a full day course that Wayne will be teaching on testing the data warehouse on December 3rd and 4th from 11 a.m. to 2:30. So two sessions, one on one day, one on the 3rd and one on the 4th. So if you're interested in more information on that online live class, you can go to www.iist.org/online for more information and to register. We will now close the webinar. I want to thank Wayne today for your time. It was a great webinar. I got a lot of positive, I'm just looking at the evaluations here and a lot of positive feedback, so I appreciate that. Thank you, Wayne. And just like to remind everyone that today's webinar is being sponsored by IIST, the leaders in education-based certifications and training. For more information on how IIST can help you or your organization, please visit www.iist.org. Thank you again, Wayne. Thank you very much.
Thank you.